Welcome to the Walker River State Recreation Area. My name is Daniel Wassman and I'm a park ranger here. Today we're out here at the Pitchfork Ranch along the East Fork of the Walker River, and we're going to be showing you guys a great way to cook when you're out here camping in the park. This is a great way to cook with your family, and it's almost guaranteed to come out good every time. What we're going to be using are cast iron Dutch ovens. Now, pioneers have been cooking this way ever since they came into Nevada and crossed the Sierra Nevadas on their way into California. To get started with cooking with Dutch ovens, all you really need is the oven itself and a heat source. You can make this simple by hanging the Dutch oven on a tripod over an open fire, or you can just set it right on the grates over your fire pit. We're going to be using a few additional tools that just make it more convenient. So what we have here today is two ovens. We have a 12-inch Dutch oven and a 10-inch Dutch oven. We have a metal table. We have a special tool that will allow you to lift the lids without burning yourself. And we have a charcoal chimney full of charcoal with a little fire starter that you can put underneath to get it going. And what makes this more convenient is if you have a table, you can space the charcoal out and you can evenly distribute the heat across the oven. That's a little harder to do if you're cooking over an open flame, because the flame is flickering and heating up different parts of the oven at different times. Now, if you notice, the lid on a Dutch oven, it has a lip on it, so you can set the charcoal briquettes on top, and when you lift the lid up, it catches the charcoal and the ash and it's not spilling down into your food. Now we're going to go ahead and light up the charcoal first. Now I'm using a torch, but any kind of lighter or a match will work. The briquettes will take about 20 minutes to get going. Then we'll preheat the ovens and then put the food in. So our next step, we're going to preheat the Dutch oven just so by the time we get our food ready, the oven's nice and hot and everything's ready to go. We're going to spread some around on the top and we're going to put some on the bottom. We're going to really heat this Dutch oven up because this recipe calls for the oven to be a little hotter than most. Today I'm going to be showing you one of my favorite things to make in a Dutch oven for breakfast. We call this the bacon bomb. Boy Scout groups also love it as well. It's pretty easy to make. All you need are 2 pounds of ground pork. We're going to be using Jimmy Dean sausage today. Some jalapenos, some bacon, barbecue sauce, and cream cheese. Alright, so we start this recipe off by getting 2 pounds of ground pork and we flatten it into a square or rectangular shape. The next thing we do is we get cream cheese. We're using about 8 ounces today. You might not use all of it. And you put the cream cheese down in the middle. You kind of spread it out a little bit. You just want to make sure it's in a good spot where we can wrap this up over the top of it. Next, we cut up a single jalapeno. You can add more or less depending on how spicy you want it. Now you can really add anything you want to have inside here. Some people like bell peppers, some people like onions. But today we're going to keep it simple and we're just going to do cream cheese and cut up jalapenos. Now the next step is you roll it up into a loaf. We'll close up the ends here. now we have a big ball of sausage with the jalapenos and cream cheese on the inside. Next, we're going to wrap it in bacon. We are going to make a bacon weave and just roll the bomb right up in there. Start the weave by putting half the bacon down. Laying one strip across the side. Now when your weave is ready, you set it in there. I'm going to put a little bit of barbecue sauce in between the sausage and the bacon. This just gives it a little extra flavor. Then we roll it up. And we can put a little more on the other side. Just make sure you got it completely covered. Now it's ready for the oven. So now that we have our bacon bomb prepared, it is ready to go right into the oven. And our oven's preheated, so it starts cooking instantly. Now, one thing you can do to make this a little more convenient, you can put some kind of grate or a trivet on the bottom just to keep the bacon bomb from making contact with the cast iron, because what's going to happen, that cast iron is going to heat up, and where the cast iron is touching the bacon bomb, it's going to burn a little bit. But in our case, the bottom will be a little charred, but the rest will come out perfect. And another thing that the trivet does is it will help keep it up out of that grease as that bacon cooks. But as you guys will see today, once you lift the bacon bomb out, that grease drains off pretty good. So we're going to keep it in here for about an hour to an hour and a half. We're just going to check it as it goes. So it's been about 30 minutes. We're going to go ahead and check on the bacon bomb. Seems to be cooking up in there very nicely. Now, you can do this because it's summertime and it's hot out. Now, in the wintertime, you do not want to be lifting up the lid and checking on what you're cooking too often, because the minute that lid comes off, you're losing a lot of heat and you're just going to be delaying your cooking time. Now, let's go ahead and talk about the number of charcoal briquettes we're using here. Now, there's a basic rule that's pretty easy to remember where you can figure out how many coals you should use, and that's called the rule of 3. And how that works is you take the diameter of the Dutch oven, this has a 12-inch diameter, and you add 3, so 12 plus 3 equals 15, and that's the amount that would go on the top of the Dutch oven. Now you would subtract 3 from the diameter to figure out how many coals would go on the bottom. So 12 minus 3 would be 9, and that's how you get a temperature of 325 degrees. You would add 2 coals to the top and 2 to the bottom to raise it by another 25 degrees. So one of the things we're going to be making today is a classic Dutch oven dessert. We call this the Lazy Peach Cobbler. It's very simple. All you need is a few cans of peaches, a box of yellow cake mix, some ground cinnamon, butter, and a little bit of 7-Up. So now we're getting ready to prepare the peach cobbler. So we have the oven preheated to 325. Now we did that using the rule of 3 that we talked about. So there is a 10-inch diameter that's on this Dutch oven. So we have 13 coals on top and 7 on the bottom. That will give us a temperature of 325. So we're going to put in a few cans of peaches. Now the good thing about putting peaches down on the bottom is now we don't have to worry about burning the cobbler, because if it gets too hot, what it does, it just bubbles that liquid up through the cake mix. Now comes the cake mix, and we're just using a box of yellow cake mix. And you just kind of spread it out evenly. Now our butter melted on us a little bit, which is no problem. This will actually make it easier to put in there. You just want to take some chunks and scatter it around the top. And we're about using a whole stick of butter. Now we're going to add some cinnamon on top. Just a little bit of ground cinnamon. Now the lid goes back on. We'll check it again in about 45 minutes. Now you can pour some lemon lime soda into the cobbler as an optional ingredient, just to give it a little bit extra flavor. We're just going to pour a little bit right across the top. So we're just going to be adding a few more charcoal briquettes to the top and the bottom of the oven here. It's important to always have some extra going in your charcoal chimney on the side, because after about 30 to 45 minutes, as you can see, the charcoal starts to burn out, and it's important to replace those briquettes just so you can keep the heat on the oven. We're going to go ahead and take a peek at what the cobbler's looking like. Not quite done yet, but it's on its way there. So it's been about an hour and 15 minutes. We're going to go ahead and check on the bacon bomb. Looks done. The bacon is nice and crispy on top. We're going to go ahead and hold it up just for a second, just so that extra grease runs off. Now what you want to do when you pull it out of the oven, you want to give it a rest for about 5 to 10 minutes, just so that meat can kind of set up. So we're going to wait a little bit, and then we'll cut it in half and see what it looks like. Looks pretty good. We'll cut a slice of it off and see how it tastes. Tastes delicious. It's been 45 minutes. We're gonna check to see how our cobbler's doing. And our cobbler is done. If you guys ever want a way to really test to make sure, you can do the toothpick trick, where you stick a toothpick in and you pull it out, and if nothing sticks to it, means it's done. So, looks like we're definitely done. Now, this is what the cobbler's gonna look like. You got the cake mix on top, nice and golden brown, and then the peach filling on the bottom. I can't wait to try it. Now, the one thing about this dessert, it never usually lasts long. Ooh, it's hot, but it's delicious. Now that our food's out and we're all done, the next step we have to do is to clean the oven. So, Dutch ovens are really only meant to be wiped clean. So, we have a little bit of burnt sausage that's kind of stuck to the bottom. So I'm gonna kind of lightly scrape it. Luckily, we don't have to scrape too hard. The one thing about cast iron is you never want to use soap because it messes with the seasoning of the oven. So, you really want to use a warm towel. We're using some napkins. And we're just going to wipe it clean. Since we were cooking with bacon, we're going to leave a small layer of grease on the bottom, because this is going to help us season the oven. So now we're going to put the lid back on. We're going to take it back to the coals and let it heat up for a minute or two to kind of cook that grease into the cast iron. Next step is to get rid of all the burnout charcoal briquettes. Now, the one thing you want to make sure of is you have a safe place to dispose of this stuff in. You don't just want to empty this stuff out into any trash can. We've actually had incidences where people put it in a trash can with other trash and end up setting the whole trash can on fire. So make sure you're using an empty metal trash can, or you're putting it in a barbecue or a fire pit or someplace where you can bury the briquettes to make sure they're not going to start a fire. I'm going to dump the ash into a hole in a fire pit. And then we'll just get a shovel over here and bury it so we don't start any fires. Now we can go check on our oven. Looks like it's heated up enough to where it's nice and seasoned for the next time we use it. Now, if you don't have bacon grease, another way you can season it is after you cook it and wipe it out, you can put a layer of olive oil in there and do the exact same thing. I have a little fire starter here. You just put it in the bottom. You don't have to have a fire starter. You could use newspaper, you can use some pine needles, just anything that will light up real fast. Hold on, I'm gonna have to cut that. I think this lighter's dead. To try, see how it turned out. One thing about this dessert, doesn't ever last very long. It's hot, but it tastes delicious.